Everybody, back to our coverage of the George Zimmerman trial. Craig Melvin joins me with more now from Sanford, Florida. Craig.
Thomas, Judge Nelson has just resumed the trial here, George Zimmerman's murder trial in Sanford, Florida. Judge Nelson just gavelled things back to order. Let's go ahead and take a look in the courtroom. In fact, let's go ahead and listen in as well.
Talk about scheduling. It doesn't have to be right now.
We could do it now while they're getting settled in.
Okay.
Here or there? They're not here. We don't have to be. So what is it that you needed help with?
We're trying to coordinate an opportunity to take Benjamin Crump's deposition, and the only time that's been offered to us was to...
Okay, as we wait for the state to go ahead and call its 35th witness here, I want to go ahead and bring in MSNBC legal analyst Lisa Bloom, Professor Jelani Cobb, and USA Today reporter as well, Yamiche Alcindor. Yamiche, let me start with you because you are one of the few reporters that's been inside that courtroom from the beginning of the trial. Talk to me a little bit about what you saw in terms of the jury's response to the witness just before lunch, Amy Seward, that firearms specialist. How was the jury reacting?
I think they were really interested in seeing how that gun worked. They've always been taking notes throughout the whole trial, but I think in this portion of the trial, they really took more notes. They really looked in very deeply. They really, I think, gave her testimony and what she was doing with the gun weight. I can't say what they actually thought about it, of course, but I think that they were very interested in what she was showing them because she was cocking back the gun and showing them how the gun and bullets would work.
Professor Cobb, we also learned from her testimony that at this point, it appears again based on her testimony, that Zimmerman left the car with the bullet in the chamber and the full magazine as well. What else did we learn from Ms. Seward?
Well, I think the interesting thing here is like to not just simply focus on the testimony from the firearm expert, but to look at it in the context of the testimony we've seen in the last 2 days. And we can kind of start seeing where the prosecution is going with this. One, we heard from the medical examiner that Mrs. Zimmerman's injuries were not severe. As she said, they were minor and insignificant. And then this morning, we heard from a professor of his who remarked in some detail about how familiar Mrs. Zimmerman was with the particularities of self-defense law in the state of Florida.
And one of the things, Professor Cobb, that I found especially interesting about that is here you had, yesterday in court, they played that interview, that Fox interview, where George Zimmerman said, when asked pointedly, were you familiar with the stand your ground law in Florida? He said no. And we heard from the professor this morning, the Army JAG attorney, that he did in fact teach a course where that was covered.
And a course in which Mrs. Zimmerman did quite well. He got an A grade. And so now we're seeing someone who was not severely injured and someone who is very familiar with the contours of self-defense as a legal idea in the state of Florida. And now someone who we see, got out of the car with a bullet in the chamber of the gun. And so in total, it starts to point to someone who, perhaps had an idea or perhaps was already on edge. And remember that they're going for murder too here, and they're trying to establish his mindset here that, perhaps this person actually didn't behave in this way and then retroactively came up with a story that would seem to rationalize his actions.
Lisa Bloom, who's left for the state? Who have we not heard from at this point that you expect we will hear from?
Well, we haven't heard from the medical examiner who did the autopsy on Trayvon Martin, and that's going to be important testimony. We haven't heard from any Martin family members yet. I would especially be looking forward to the testimony of Trayvon Martin's mother. We expect her to say that that's Trayvon on that 911 call screaming for his life just before the bullet goes off. There may be more crime scene analysts and technical forensic type witnesses, so I'm going to be looking out for them as well. And Professor Cobb is absolutely right. It's time to start putting together the evidence. I'm sure the jury is doing that too. When I heard this firearms expert testifying, I started putting it together with what we heard of George Zimmerman saying he was in fear. He was in fear when he got out of the car. Well, now we know that he had not only a loaded gun on him, but a gun with 8 bullets in it, one that was in the chamber without any kind of external safety device, meaning he could shoot it off just in a moment, which is exactly what happened. And we know that Trayvon Martin now was shot at point-blank range. So I'm sure the jury is starting to synthesize and put all the evidence together as well.
Lisa, while you were talking, we just got word that the state, Judge Nelson says the state is going to be resting its case today. The defense will start presenting its case on Friday. Judge Nelson right now talking about some scheduling issues. If we can, let's just listen for a few seconds, and we'll come back out and we'll talk about what this could mean. Take a listen.
Whatever purposes you need to get ready, but it was always this court's intention that as soon as the state rests, that the defense begins their case. That's how it happens in every case I've ever had, and was my intention to continue to do that. And Friday would be the first business day after the holiday. So
what we're asking for is a little more time, given the way this case has proceeded. As the court's aware, we were still litigating the admissibility of evidence after the jury selection began. We certainly couldn't have taken Mr. Crump's deposition during the trial day. The court doesn't expect either Mr. O'Mara or myself to leave the courtroom, I wouldn't think, to take his
you've left for other reasons, but I don't want to go there. I don't want to go there. And I don't want to get into a discussion back and forth about what times may have been available, but it's never been requested for this court to recess even a half hour earlier. I know during the Fry hearings we recessed on a Saturday because your witness wasn't available, and the court had to continually ask when your witness would be available to finish it. I had to be the one who moved that forward. Neither side moved that forward because I wanted to get that matter finished because you wanted to know an answer about it before opening statements. And I accomplished that. And if there had been a request to recess even an hour earlier, I would have done that. But now I have a jury sequestered that are going to be off on Thursday, and you don't want court on Friday, that's Saturday, Sunday. I'm not doing that.
We asked the court
Okay, end of discussion.
the case so that we
Okay, there you have Judge Nelson and the attorneys there in the courtroom haggling over precisely when the defense will start their case. But again, apparently the state is going to rest its case today. Lisa Bloom, I want to bring you back in because we were just talking moments ago about who else we could expect to testify. You indicated the medical examiner. Heretofore, I think most people suspected that at least Trayvon Martin's mother would testify as well. Highly unlikely, one would think at least, that both of those witnesses are going to be able to be called and cross-examined today, no?
Well, that's right. So we'll see what the state does. They might be reserving some for rebuttal. There's the prosecution case in chief. That's what we're in now. There's the defense case if they choose to put one on, and we understand that they do. And then the prosecution has one more opportunity to do a rebuttal case. In fact, the defense could then do a rebuttal. We can get into serve rebuttals, and that can go on for some time. But let me explain what's happening here, because as a trial lawyer, I can tell you it can sometimes be very difficult to have witnesses on hand ready to go when you don't know when the other side's case is going to end. And it sounds to me as though that might be what's going on here, that perhaps the defense just does not have a witness today or does not have a witness available for Friday. And they're also talking about some discovery matters. You know, Florida's very curious because the witnesses can have an out-of-court deposition before they come into court and testify. That means the trial lawyers, like Don West and Mark O'Mara, have to try to be in two places at once. They have to be in the trial court and they have to be outside the court in the deposition. That's hard to do. So this is a tough scheduling matter, and the defense is just asking for a little bit more time.
And Lisa, as you were talking, Judge Nelson brought the jury back into the courtroom. She said this is something that they are going to take up a little bit later, presumably later this afternoon, since there again is no courts being held on the 4th of July. So we're going to, of course, keep our eye on what's happening inside the courtroom here in Sanford, Florida. That's going to do it for Andrew Mitchell Reports right now. Stay tuned for more live coverage of the George Zimmerman murder trial next on News Nation with Tamron Hall.